morning, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. So this morning, I look on the models here and I look at some outlooks. We have a moderate risk for flooding now across St. Louis, Jefferson City, and other various areas around the Midwest here this afternoon and this morning also. So we have a moderate risk for 12Z, and a little bit past that is when it starts to stretch into St. Louis. Expecting 2 rounds of storms across this region here. And also there's a slight risk that exists across parts of the western high plains here, particularly across Wyoming. Salt Lake City is involved in that too, by the way. Idaho Falls is in there too, as well as Cheyenne. About 8 million people total are in both of the slight risk areas combined, and almost 4 million people are in the moderate risk for today. So it's getting pretty busy today. Unfortunately, a lot of this I won't be able to cover here. But as far as a slight risk for severe weather is concerned, we have Kansas City involved in that even. I think that'll be a little bit later this evening. And then also St. Louis and Jefferson City we have to keep an eye on as well. Main threat will be wind, but the hail and tornado threat does exist. This is also going to be sparked by an interesting setup, because if we look right now over this region, we look at the satellite, storms are already ongoing, and this is what's contributing to part of the flood threat. But right now you can't see it. But maybe a little bit later we may get a little interesting feature to pop up on the satellite here, and it's not something that you'd easily pick up on models too quickly. It's called a mesoscale convective vortex. The mesoscale convective vortex is interesting because, for one, with most storm systems, they spin counterclockwise. This feature spins clockwise and is a little bit more so in relation to a hurricane than anything else, because mainly the wind shear setup with a tropical system or mesoscale convective vortex, or MCV, you don't want much wind shear. We do have a little bit of it, but it's not significant enough, I think, to really inhibit it from developing, especially as we go later into the day, because that's when it's anticipated to actually move across this region here into the north to northern Missouri here, and it's the Midwest. So we go into 12Z, and this is where we start to see that wind shear begin to lighten up at 500 and 700. And then by the time we get into the afternoon, new MCV develops, and this is when business will start to pick up across this region once again. Not to mention, there's very specific conditions for an MCV to develop, and we'll talk about that more in another video. When that will happen, we'll have to wait and see. But like I said, wind shear weakens over this region. It's expected to develop more so over the north central plains here before it gets to Iowa. And you notice that something is going on here, because you start to see an increase in the mid-level jet here as we get later into the evening. So it's definitely a telltale sign that something's up, but the feature itself is very hard to pick up. So this is also what's going to aid in the damaging wind and tornado threat as well. Low-level jet itself isn't that impressive, of course, and that's always another telltale sign. But mainly the best way to pick up on that kind of feature would actually be to look on satellite. But right now, of course, it hasn't really begun to really take shape yet. I do anticipate somewhere along this clear spot here where we could be starting to see some cirrus clouds to develop. Somewhere around here is where I would be looking for anyone that's a weather nerd enthusiast. That being said, we've looked at all the wind profiles. Let's look at the other parameters that are always important with severe weather. We already know that it's going to be hot here across this region as a whole. And as we go throughout the day, even with those thunderstorms developing, we still get into the 80s here. And then off to the south of that, sorry guys, but off to the south and southwest of that, you do have some pretty warm temperatures as well. So that clash there where we're getting from 90 to 70, it's going to become a very interesting flashpoint there. Not to mention the dew points are, of course, very rich across this region. It's also raining right now, so it's no secret that it's going to be pretty humid, pretty moist out there. So no surprises And with that and any sort of daytime heating across this region, there we go. We'll get another round of storms here. So let's go ahead now and take a quick look at what radar could look like as a whole. And here's that first round starting to dissipate, and then look what happens here. Here's that resurgence beginning to develop later into the evening, into the late afternoon. That's going to be a large part due to the MCV that develops there. And with that also, we have to take a look at the instability here. Like I said, bulk shear isn't going to be super impressive, so this is going to keep the tornado threat minimal, but there's still a chance of a few tornadoes developing. I really would say maybe a couple at best, but we'll see what happens. But as far as instability is concerned, there's a decent amount over across this region, especially as we get later into the evening. Over towards the eastern part of, eastern part of Kansas, western part of Missouri here, we also have to watch that region too. I think as we go later into the evening, we may see a little bit more development across this region. Because notice the instability does push a little bit further off to the west, but model guidance is a little bit limited at this time. So I'm just working with what I have really at this point. As far as bulk shear is concerned, we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. Interestingly enough, there are a couple pockets here that do pique my interest. We're at about 59 knots total, but at the low levels it's not super impressive. Well, that's contaminated as all can be. But this is a slightly better look here. Decent directional shear, so that might be enough to get a quick spin up or two, but outside of that, really not a lot to go off of there. Like I said, surface instability is at about 2,000, so like I said, conditions are just favorable enough, but usually that's all you would need with a setup with an MCV coming into play. That being said, last thing we're going to do here, of course, is go ahead and look at the QPF, which is quantity precipitation forecast here. And unfortunately, due to multiple rounds of storms here, we could see some really ridiculous totals by the end of this run. So this is towards the end of our 18-hour run here. We see some areas where we're getting up to 10 plus inches of rain possibly. Let's hope that this doesn't occur, because if it does, some catastrophic flooding will be ongoing across these regions. So make sure we're staying weather aware today. Also make sure that we're staying updated with this channel and any other weather YouTubers as well. Make sure you're smashing that like button, decimating the subscribe button, making sure you're getting that bell on to be notified every video, and then also hitting that share button. This has been Tyler Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you enjoyed this update. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care and have a nice day.